Hi, everyone. My name is Eugenia, and this is my project one, the youth RedWave, with the question, are young Americans turning conservative? In this project, I used survey data from the American National Election Studies to explore how partisan identification has shifted across different age groups over time, especially among young voters. Why this story matters? Well, for decades, we've heard that young people lean liberal. That assumption drives how campaigns target younger voters, how professors talk about politics, and even how the media frames elections. But when we look closely, the picture is starting to change. The story matters for students and young voters themselves, for educators who teach civics and politics, and for policymakers and campaigns who may be rethinking how to connect with the next generation. In short, the youth vote isn't guaranteed anymore, and that has big implications. The data I used comes from the American National Election Studies. It's a long running survey that has collected data on US voters since 1952. I focused on four age groups: 18 to 29, 30 to 44, 45 to 59, and 60 and older. People in the survey reported whether they identified as Democrat, Republican, or Independent. I processed the counts into percentages so I could compare groups fairly across the years. Here you could see the Republican identification over time. The blue line represents 18 to 29-year-olds. Notice how it climbs in recent years to levels we haven't seen since 1980s during the Reagan era. That was surprising to me. Youth Republican identification today looks very similar to that historical peak. I also noticed that 30 to 44-year-olds are trending upward as well, while the older groups are holding steady. So the red wave is not just among the seniors, it's showing up in younger cohorts as well. Democratic identification and generational gap. On the Democratic side, the trend is going the other way. Identification with Democrats has been declining steadily across all age groups since the 60s. Younger voters still lean more Democratic overall, but the margin is much smaller than in the past. When we look at the generational gap, uh, the distance between youth and seniors is narrowing. This means the old idea of young people equaling blue and older people equaling red does not hold up anymore as strongly as it once did. I have engineered two new features. Feature number one being Youth Lean Index. It's a Republican percentage minus the Democratic percentage for the 18 to 29 group. It shows whether youth tilts red or blue and by how much. The index is still negative, meaning youth are still more blue, but the gap is much smaller now. Secondly, I looked at excuse me, red wave momentum, feature number two, which tracks the year-to-year change in youth Republican identification. Recently, momentum has been positive again, which signals growing conservative identification among young people. Limitations and ethics. Of course, there are important caveats. This is survey data, so no results um, can be accurate. Results depend on sample size and also who responds. Sometimes the youth subgroup is smaller and the percentages will be more volatile. Also, the party identification is self-reported, so you know it doesn't mean that if I identify as a Republican, I'm going to vote Republican. Sometimes survey data, um, self-reporting survey data can be misleading in the sense that if somebody identifies as a Republican, they may vote Democrat or Independent and vice versa. Also, the way that people interpret labels, such as weak Democrat or strong Republican, those notions have changed over the decades as well. For these reasons, I avoid saying this is definitely a red wave. Instead, I see it as a trend worth paying attention to, but not a guaranteed future. As a takeaway, the big takeaway is that the old assumption, young voters are liberal, is no longer true today. Young people are still more Democratic than Republicans, but the lean is getting weaker and weaker, and the conservative identification is on the rise. This should be a wake-up call for both parties, as the youth vote is still up for grabs. Thank you so much.